Production funding for Another View comes from the Hampton Citizens Unity Commission, using the time, talents, and skills of a broad base of citizen volunteers to help break down racial and cultural barriers, working to achieve the City of Hampton's community plan for a healthy, diverse community. And from the African American Programming Advisory Group, community visionaries assisting WHRO to engage, enlighten, educate, and entertain all communities in Hampton Roads. And now, Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. Tonight, we're talking about the economy and unemployment. The U.S. Department of Labor recently announced the latest unemployment figures for January of this year, 6.9% for whites and 12.6% for African Americans. The 2008 annual unemployment average for Virginia was 3.5% for whites, 4.4% for Hispanic or Latinos, and 6.2% for blacks. Those numbers were from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So how come the numbers are so much higher for the black community? How do we find jobs? And what do we do if we find ourselves in the unenviable position of receiving a pink slip? Here to help us sort it all out is Dr. John Kamiru, an economist from Norfolk State University, Yvette Young, Vice President of the Urban League of Hampton Roads, and Wil LaVeist, author of Fired Up, How to Win When You Lose Your Job. Welcome to the program, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start with you, Dr. Kamiru.
Yes.
What is going on in this economy that makes the numbers so much higher for African Americans? Unemployment numbers.
Well, one of the reasons that we can look at is the nature of the training skills that people have in terms of the job that they perform. Most people who end up being laid off first are the people who have the least skills or the least required within an organization. And most organizations usually leave the professional positions to be the last option in terms of layoff after they have looked at all the other options.
So because more African Americans are in the lower echelon of positions, if you will,
yes,
they tend to be laid off first.
Very much so, and you find that because many jobs which are in the lower echelon, they don't require maybe professional training or college education. So in that way, when they are about to make a decision who should stay or who should go, you find that the people who are always on the lower echelon of the corporations are the first one to be let
Now,
go.
but we've been in double digits. The black community has been in double digits for quite a while.
That's right.
Where the rest of the country now is concerned about reaching double digits in terms of unemployment. That's got to play a big role in the psyche of our community.
It sure does, and most often you find that people become very discouraged in terms of looking for work, because if you are laid off, because maybe you are the first person to be laid off, organization didn't want you, and you start looking for work, you find that those opportunities in other organizations are not available. And after sometimes, when people are looking for work, we usually refer to those people who become discouraged as discouraged unemployed workers who are not even bothering to look for work again. In actual fact, the numbers that you are referring to, those are numbers of people who are actually looking for work.
So the unemployment figures are people who are actually looking for work.
Looking for work and actively doing that. So we do have a substantial number of people who are already discouraged, which means we don't have record of those within the labor statistics. And the number should be actually be reflected as higher than.
So it would be even higher than the 12.8%
Very much so.
that is going on.
That's right.
Now, Yvette, you're with the Urban League, and one of your missions is to help people to get back into the workforce,
Yes.
to be able to find jobs. Can you give us some anecdotes of, what are people telling you as they come to see you and seek your services?
Well, some of them are telling us because they're a little older, they feel that there is just it's not going to happen for them. They feel very, very much discouraged. We have some that have limited skills, or were working jobs that was paying, the bare minimum, and so they feel like it's a hopeless situation. So we try to help them to, build their confidence level by teaching them the skills and making them stand out a little bit more so that they can feel that they can compete.
So is it a lack of education that's a big factor?
Yes, that's a big factor, lack of education. We also have individuals that are coming to us that were incarcerated. So that's another issue, because where in the past we were able to find employers that will be willing to take on someone that had a record. It's a little bit more difficult today because they're competing against those that do not have a record, or those that even have degrees in some cases that are looking for just a job.
Because they've been laid off also.
Yes.
Now, Wil, you know about this from personal experience.
Oh, yeah.
and that was a catalyst for you writing the book, Fired Up, because as a professional, you've found yourself in that position of getting that pink slip. Tell us a little bit about what goes through your mind when that happens to you.
Oh, it's tough. I mean, what I talk about in the book is really the emotional side of it. And, you know, when you talk about being discouraged, you know, it's not only those on the lower rungs, but those on the higher rungs. One of the times people don't recognize is that the higher you go up, a lot of times the steeper the fall when you're an African American, when you're a person of color. And what I talk about is sort of the emotional side, how you deal with that, how you can come back. One of the key things is that if you've been fired or if you've been hit by a 2x4 like I have, shocked, one of the things you realize is that once you come back from it, you know, there are worse things. You can come back for it. So that fear that you might have of being fired again, it doesn't consume you as much.
Well, you're an educated man. You've been to college. You did all the things that you're supposedly,
right.
you know, you're supposed to do as a journalist. You know, so to be fired or to be given a pink slip because of economic reasons that really you have no control over.
Right.
That also must play on the mind because we're control freaks.
In my situation, you know, I was angry, you know, because a lot of it had to do with someone's personal feelings towards me. And that happens a lot because we are competitive and people are people and people have ways of doing things that they shouldn't really do. In this climate, yeah, it is because a lot of the economic situation and there are cuts going on. There are also cuts going on because companies can cut because they can say it's the economic situation, so they're cutting. But I think, and you know, I reread my book all the time because one of the things that it alerts you to is that it can happen. It's not the worst thing that can happen. And it also keeps you on your game. It keeps you mindful that a job is not promised to you. Again, a job is not promised to you. A severance is not promised to you. And it keeps you mindful to do the things that you need to do to focus on what you're supposed to be doing, how you're going to take care of yourself, how you're going to take care of your family if you have one.
Dr. Kamiru, let me ask you now, for example, recently Smithfield Foods announced that they were closing their plant, and they're headquartered here. Tell us from an economist perspective, what happens to that community?
One thing that is so devastating is when people don't have a job or jobs in that community, and it's a very small community in that respect, they have to start looking for work somewhere else. The only thing is they do not have another similar type of work which they could find there. So the best alternative in that respect is for them to reconsider their career choice because they cannot be able to continue just looking for work which is not there. It may be necessary maybe to think about going back to school again, or most likely to change the career which they have been pursuing with a company like Smithfield Food, which is a packaging and processing plant in that respect. And that means they have to go maybe further from where they are, maybe travel further, maybe literally relocate. And if it's the only company which is there, in this case, Smithfield Food is the most largest company in the community, you may find that the community may become less attractive for other people to move in. And the effects are obvious because the tax base tends to go down.
Goes down.
And other issues such as schools, you know, that they suffer because of that.
So, Yvette, when someone, say a worker from Smithfield Foods comes to you and they've been there for 20 years and they just got laid off, how do you help them to start to do some of the things that Dr. Kamiru was talking about, to change their career path or to find something else?
The first thing that we do is we do a career assessment to find out what were their skills that they gained while they were working at Smithfield Food, for example. And then after that, we talk to them and find out what is it that you want to do. And then we start looking at possible options with them in order to determine, you know, what can they do. And from there, we began to, we provide one-on-one counseling because that's really the heart of our program, to treat each person's individual situation differently because we're all different. And then from there, we kind of give them some options that they might want to consider. Some of the things that we work with is sometimes we have college students that come to us and they have, you know, they have their educational background, but they have not worked. And so what might be an option is to go into a program like the AmeriCorps Vista program, in which they can gain some viable skills if they're able to, and receive a stipend, for example.
How hard is it to convince someone that they've got to pick up roots, or they may have to make a radical change in order to make that employment happen?
Sometimes it's very difficult because we all want to hold on to what's familiar, and having to face the reality that we really need to do something different and move away from what we're comfortable with. That's difficult sometimes. But we've been successful in helping people just to realize that maybe you might even have to just go as far as working in Newport News and not in Norfolk. That's a difficult one.
You know, it's always amazing to me because it's not being from here originally, how that tunnel is such a barrier.
Oh, yes.
You know, where others of us come in the area, it's like, well, what's the big deal? You know, but that's a very good point.
That's right.
In terms of changing. What about, and I'll throw this out to whomever wants to answer it, but what about generational unemployment? How do you break that cycle?
Wow, generational unemployment. I mean, I think what a lot of people have to do, she talked about, what do you really want to do? You know, people have to start looking at what is their purpose, what is it that they really have a knack for, what is it that they really enjoy, and begin focusing on that. You can't continue to look at what your parents did or what your family's business seems to be, but you have to start evaluating who you are, because the era of blue-collar jobs, one dad managing to take care of the whole family on one paycheck with an 8th grade education, excuse me, that era is gone.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's absolutely gone. You must be educated. You must be diverse in terms of what you can do, and you must begin to focus on, okay, what am I really here for, and what am I really have a knack for, and get focused on it. Otherwise, you're going to be left in the dust.
There's an attitude amongst some that, you know, well, the man is keeping me down, or there's nothing out there because, you know, it sounds like the man is having some troubles also with in terms of employment at this point in time. So what would you say, Yvette, is a key factor in trying to resell yourself once you become unemployed?
Well, one of the things that that a person needs to do even before becoming unemployed is to take that job and maximize whatever you can learn while you're there. Also, you know, take some classes and things like that in preparation, because we never know what can happen. So once you've lost that job, there's something else that you can do. So if you're working in a Smithfield plant, maybe you're a computer novice at home. So now you can take that and utilize that skill that you've learned to help you find something else.
So no one should assume that because they have a job today that they're going to continue to have a job. But does that create a certain paranoia, do you think, Dr. Kamiru, in terms of, you know, getting your regular job done on a day-to-day basis?
Of course, people are always anxious, and they fear the unknown. But the whole idea, though, is to think in terms of what do I need to do different. And the best thing is to also think about professional improvement, personal improvement, where although you have a specific job, you try to enrich what you do so that you become more valuable to the organization, where it's not just one task-oriented type of work, where you become multifaceted. You can be asked to do more than just one thing, so that they don't look at you as someone who is expendable, but you're an asset to the organization. And at the same time, you have always to think ahead. If something happens, what am I supposed to do? For the young people who in their 20s, 30s and all that, it's not late to go back and change the track of your career.
To go back to school,
That's right.
Something completely
That's
different.
right.
Okay.
And try to look at what could be the most acceptable career path in a region like Hampton Roads area, where we don't have manufacturing sectors, but they're more service oriented.
I was going to say also entrepreneurship. I mean, people, college is not for everyone.
That's right.
But everyone could have some kind of skill, or everybody's sent here with some kind of purpose. And I think a lot of people should be looking at entrepreneurship. Working for somebody is actually riskier than working for yourself, because if you can come into a job like I did one day and at the end of the day be handed a pink slip, What is that telling you? I'd rather be in control of my own mistakes than to be able to walk into a building and someone say, your services are no longer legal.
Let me ask you, Will, because we only have a couple minutes left, and I want to get some really concrete, specific things that people should do should they find themselves receiving a pink slip. What is kind of the process, and how are you to conduct yourself so that you can make sure that you can start the immediate process of moving on?
One of the things, 4 things I talk about in the book, Fired Up, How to Win when you lose your job. First, you got to tell somebody immediately. That begins the process of networking. One thing leads to another. People hear about jobs. They let you know what's going on. 2, you should start reflecting on your own career. How did you get from where you were to where you are now? When you start thinking about your life as being in your own career, you'll start seeing that you yourself are a miracle and that you did do a lot of productive things, and you start inspiring yourself. 4th, let your emotions flow. For me, it was anger. Some people need to go in the corner and cry. Other people, you got to let your emotions do what they do, because that's why God gave you emotions, to get that release, to get you focused on what you do, to get you motivated. Mine motivated me to write a book. 4th, you got to start, as you're planning, as you're doing these things, you got to start getting to the point of accepting, looking at your role, how you can, what you did, how you can learn from it, and forgiving so that you can move on. Because the more you keep ruminating over these things, oh, they fired me, oh, they did me wrong, that's time wasted that you could be focusing on your next move.
On the next move. And Yvette, do you have some tips for those who are left in a job situation? Because I know that can also be stressful in terms of people being laid off, but you're the one who didn't get laid off. How do you overcome that guilt?
I think you can overcome it by continuing to do what you're supposed to do while you're there, and not working and living in fear that you're next. Just do the best job that you can do, and just be thankful because it wasn't your time. And so you don't have to live with a lot of guilt, you know, because a person that you work with for many years. But I would suggest that you reach out to that person and be a comfort to them, and not just say, wow, it just happened to them, and you know, I'm very happy that I'm still employed. But you need to reach out to that person. You know, because I imagine some people feel very awkward about doing that, being able to reach out and to say something positive to the person who has been laid off. Did that happen in your instance? We only got a couple seconds left.
Oh, yeah, I've been on both sides. I saw some of my friends be fired while I was still employed, and when it happened to me, there are people who reached out. And I think that she's right. I think that that's important. That's important to the healing process of moving on.
Okay. All right, so we've got to wrap things up. I really appreciate you all coming and talking with us about some ways to overcome this situation that we're in. And we all have to remember that things can change and that things will get better. Thank you so very much. That's Dr. Kamiru with Norfolk State University. Thank you for joining us, an economist there. And Yvette Young with the Urban League of Hampton Roads, and Wil LaVeist, author of Fired Up, How to Win When You Lose Your Job. And up next, some advice to help you and the IRS, help you with the IRS. And later in the show, one young entrepreneur who literally changed his diet and created a business. But first, some events you may want to check out right here in Hampton Roads. Welcome back to the program. In tonight's lifestyle segment, our money expert, Eric Labatt, has some tips to help individuals with their taxes. But first, our spiritual advisor, Dr. Melvin Mariner, has some thoughts on why in these tough economic times, more and more people are turning to the church.
Barbara, I'm here with Dr. Melvin Mariner, the pastor of Grove Baptist Church and another views expert when it comes to spiritual matters. Dr. Mariner, welcome.
Glad to be here, Lisa.
Many churches are experiencing record numbers of people joining, and some people are attributing that to the economy.
Well, you know, it's not just one dynamic. I think there are many reasons why people are, I guess, re-embracing, reconnecting with the local church. Regardless of denomination, people are looking for answers that we haven't gotten from our careers, that we haven't gotten from our state or government, whether it's local, state, or federal. They're looking for answers that will soothe their brokenness. People can handle certain elements of being in debt, but when it is over a length of time, the patterns build up. And so people are looking for hope. And so I think churches are seeing influx of people because, again, so many social and psychodynamics that play, but we're also seeing churches become more relevant. Is the church doing too much? No. Perhaps we aren't doing enough, because whatever the needs are, we should at least try our very best to meet the needs of the people as much as we can at any given time that we can. And I say, as the Apostle Paul, we have to become all things, all people, that we might gain them or strengthen them, that they will feel just as significant as we feel in the church.
I am here with Eric Labatt, the personal finance consultant for the Labatt Consulting Group and Another View's Money Mentor. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
So, Eric, what's new out there when it comes to taxes for individuals?
As an individual taxpayer, on the withholding allowance form, or the W-4, that changes. And what the W-4 form provides, I like to call that a financial weapon, because it adds up the number of allowances an individual has. It tells the employer to take out the appropriate federal tax dollars from their paycheck. And the higher the number is, the less money is taken out of your check. So it also incorporates how many deductions you have. For example, if you're paying a mortgage, you're going to have some mortgage interest that you're paying. So for every certain amount of dollars that you can increase your deductions, it'll give you an additional allowance. And when you increase those numbers, you keep more money in your pocket. Millions of Americans get $2,000 and above tax refunds. Instead of keeping that money, that's like giving the federal government a tax-free loan. So we want to show people how they can keep more of their money throughout the year.
We promise to bring you an uplifting story each week about something good happening in the African American community. This week, Lisa Godley introduces us to Dwayne Thompson, an entrepreneur who turned a medical problem into a thriving business.
Dwayne Thompson is all smiles now, but he can remember when he had little to smile about. The day he learned that he'd have to give up one of his favorite foods, salsa. As a college football player, Dwayne and the rest of the team ate salsa constantly, but he soon discovered that the acid from the tomatoes was making him sick.
I thought that I had a ulcer, but it ended up being acid reflux and heartburn. So what ended up happening is my grandmother used to have a fresh produce that she would bring up on the weekends, and I would take that, make my own salsa, and I introduced it to the guys that played football with me, and they ended up liking it better than the commercial brand.
Now, how did you know your grandmother's produce would work as a salsa?
I really didn't. I didn't. It was really a fluke. It was something that I just decided to do one day after a long game on the weekend. I came back to my dorm room, a bunch of guys sitting in my room. My grandmother had brought this care package of produce, and the guys, she usually brought fresh roast beef too. And the roast beef was gone. They had eaten the roast beef, and all I had left was just a bell pepper. There were some other herbs that she had picked out of her garden. And I was sitting there. The cafeteria was closed. You know, I didn't want to go to the greasy spoon. So I had this one hot plate, and I had one pot. And I just decided to cut this up, and I had a bag of chips. Decided to cut it up and chop my hand at it.
Thompson admits that the first batch wasn't that tasty, but he says it didn't make him sick either, so he started experimenting to improve the taste and eventually came up with a salsa that not only tastes good, but wouldn't give him heartburn or acid reflux.
Well, the bell pepper base of the salsa provides vitamin C, and then what we've done is we've scaled back the normal traditional tomato-based, as that's in most tomato-based salsas. We've scaled that back, and what you have is just a puree, and that we heat it up. We heat up all the acidic level of it, so you have a lower acidic product. So it doesn't aggravate anyone that has acid reflux or heartburn.
Thompson came up with the name salsa sabrosa. Sabrosa in Spanish means great flavor and great taste. And this definitely has a wonderful aroma. So let's taste.
This is good.
But if you won't take my word for it, how about the opinions of the men and women who recently judged the 2008 Virginia Food and Beverage Expo? Out of more than 70 entries, they chose Sabrosa Gourmet Salsa as the best new food product of the year, earning it the coveted Diamond Award. Thompson never dreamed that an idea that started on a dormitory hot plate would end up on the shelves of grocery stores like Farm Fresh. But it's taught him a lesson that he doesn't mind sharing with others.
Follow your passion, follow your dream. If it's something that you really feel strongly about and it's something that is positive, go for it, because you never know what's going to take you.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We'd love to hear from you. Blog us at www.anotherview.tv, email us at anotherview@whro.org, or write us at 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk, 23508. Next week, keeping jazz alive. Good night.
Production funding for Another View comes from Hampton's 400th Anniversary Committee and the Hampton Neighborhood Commission, partnering with neighborhoods throughout the city, working hand in hand to create vibrant places we are proud to call home and celebrate. And from the African American Programming Advisory Group, community visionaries assisting WHRO to engage, enlighten, educate, and entertain all communities in Hampton Roads.